Ghosts, goblins, and ghouls lurk in the shadows away from the light. On the night that witches and monsters rule, waiting in darkness to give you a fright. The fog, the pumpkins, the crisp autumn air, visions of horrors coming from a nightmare. Costumed children shudder and squeal with delight, ringing doorbells on Halloween night. You're listening to Carolina Haints. Welcome, dear listener, to the Carolina Haints podcast, brought to you by Wreak Havoc Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. Eric Weiss was born in Hungary in 1874, but his family moved to America when he was 4 years old. He became an accomplished actor and stuntman, a champion cross-country runner, and an avid pilot, but you probably know him best by his stage name, Harry Houdini. Houdini famously died on Halloween night, 1926. Houdini first performed on stage at the age of 9 as a trapeze artist. If he was lucky, he may have made 50 cents a week. But he loved performing, and he had his sights set on becoming a magician. He studied magic every chance he had, and a few years later, started performing card tricks and sleight of hand. However, he was not very skilled at this type of illusion. It wasn't until he started learning escape acts that he found his true calling. By the time he was 25, he was making $300 a week, nearly $9,500 by today's standards. Later in his career, he became president of two of the most prestigious magic companies, the Martinka Company and the Society of American Magicians. He used these positions and his popularity to help young artists develop their skills and punish anyone caught stealing another magician's act. But mostly, he enjoyed defrauding psychics and mystics. Houdini invented several escape acts over the years. Some of his most famous were the milk can escape, the water torture cell, the suspended straitjacket, and being buried alive. The milk can escape involved Houdini being handcuffed and sealed inside a large milk can that was filled with water. After just a few years, Houdini evolved the idea further with the water torture cell. In this act, he had a huge mahogany and glass cell built so that people could see him as he worked to get out. Houdini would be shackled by the feet to a metal cage and then lowered into the tank. One of his most popular stunts was the straitjacket escape. He would be secured in a straitjacket, have his feet bound together, and then be suspended upside down from a skyscraper or a crane at heights up to 100 feet in the air. The overboard box escape was another play on the original milk can trick. Houdini would be placed in a wood crate with his hands and feet shackled. The crate would be nailed shut, weighed down with lead, and wrapped with ropes, and dropped into a river or other body of water. Houdini was able to resurface in less than a minute. And when the crate was pulled back up, it was still nailed shut and the rope still wrapped around it. The last famous escape was being buried alive. The first time he tried it, he did it without a casket. He laid in a 6-foot deep hole and was covered with dirt. He barely survived, losing consciousness just as he broke the surface. After that, he used a casket, but also had a straitjacket, and was buried in a huge tank of sand on stage. Houdini died on October 31st, 1926, in Detroit, Michigan. He was set to perform the Buried Alive act the following evening, and the casket from the stunt was used to transport his body back to New York. As a magician, Houdini was able to spot and expose the tricks used by so-called spiritualists and mediums of the time. He offered cash prizes to anyone who successfully demonstrated a supernatural power that he couldn't either debunk or replicate. He only paid out once. Houdini made a pact with his wife that if he died before her, he would find a way to contact her if possible. They even worked out a secret code so she would know it wasn't being faked. His wife, Bess, held seances every year on the anniversary of his death, but none of them were ever successful. She attended the last one in 1936, after which she said,
10 years is long enough to wait for any man.
But in 1940, other magicians took up the mantle and formed the official Houdini seance. To this day, seances are held every Halloween in attempts to contact the famous Houdini. Houdini died of a ruptured appendix, the source of which is cause for debate among many. Most people believe that his appendix ruptured due to multiple blows of the stomach he received a few days before. Doctors, however, are uncertain whether the blows would have ruptured the appendix. They speculate that the two events were coincidental and unrelated. Regardless, Houdini was relaxing prior to his show in Montreal, Canada, when he was approached by a group of college students. One of them, a boy named Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead, asked if it was true that Houdini could withstand any blow to the stomach, like the newspapers reported. Houdini answered casually that if he was prepared for it, he could endure quite a lot. Without another word, the boy delivered several pounding blows to Houdini's stomach. But the magician had not prepared himself. At the time he was laying on a couch resting before the show. He had broken his ankle on stage a few days before, but was determined not to cancel the show. He was not ready for what one witness described as, quote, some very hammer-like blows below the belt, end quote. Houdini was in visible pain as he performed that evening, and the pain kept him from sleeping for the next 2 nights. But he refused to see a doctor until October 24th, when he finally gave in and allowed a doctor to examine him. He was diagnosed with acute appendicitis and was told that he required immediate surgery. But he was scheduled to perform that night in Detroit and still held steadfast in his vow to never cancel a show. By the time he arrived at the Garrick Theater that evening, he was running a fever of 104 degrees. He passed out on stage halfway through the show. He was revived but still insisted on finishing his performance. After his show, he was taken to nearby Grace Hospital where he remained until he passed at 1:26 p.m. on October 31st at the age of 52. Houdini made a lot of friends during his years as an entertainer. Some of the friendships that he made may seem unlikely, like that of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The two men were hugely popular public figures in the 20s. Houdini, of course, as a magician and escape artist, and Doyle as a medical doctor and the creator of the famous Sherlock Holmes. What made their friendship so unlikely is the fact that they were very much on opposite sides of the spiritualism issue. Doyle was one of spiritualism's biggest supporters. Now, in today's society, the practice of mediums and the occult and seances and Ouija boards have taken on a certain fringe quality. But in the 20s, they were very much in fashion and more widely accepted than they are today. Remember, this is a time before Hollywood movies had come on to vilify these practices as evil. It was shortly after World War I, where as many as 20 million people had perished. Like so many others, Doyle had lost a son in the war, and joined the families of the victims that eagerly accepted spiritualism as a way they might contact their loved ones. And we've mentioned that Houdini had launched a crusade against mediums and spiritualists that he felt were scamming the public, the people he referred to as human leeches. But the truth of the matter was that Houdini was always hopeful that he would find a medium who was not a fraud. He wanted to believe. He wanted to be able to contact his mother, if at all possible. But because he was also in the business of illusion, he could always see through the scams. And so began Doyle and Houdini's unlikely friendship. Doyle praising spiritualism and bringing Houdini to different mediums to try to contact his mother, and Houdini inevitably exposing them as frauds. Doyle attempted to convince Houdini of the legitimacy of spiritualism, and Houdini tried to get Doyle to see things for what they really were. Houdini showed Doyle a simple sleight of hand trick and made it look as if he had removed his thumb. We've all seen this trick, right? But Doyle, gullible as ever, took this as proof of Houdini's paranormal powers.
My dear chap, why go around the world seeking a demonstration of the occult when you are giving one all the time?
Doyle's wife even attempted to contact Houdini's mother through the practice of automatic writing. Houdini, again, recognized her fraud and tried his best to let his friends down as gently as possible. But this was the beginning of the end of their friendship. But the nail in the coffin was when Houdini set his sights on one of the most well-known and controversial mediums of the day, Mina Marjorie Crandon, who was described as, quote, too attractive for her own good, end quote. Marjorie played on her good looks and her medium practices. She often performed seances while scantily clad or even nude, and was known to be able to produce an ectoplasmic mist from her vagina. Doyle was, of course, a supporter of Crandon, saying, quote,
The phenomena are perhaps the best attested in the whole annals of psychic research.
End quote. After Houdini's public exposing of Mina Crandon, he and Doyle never talked to one another again. Doyle maintained that Houdini was, quote,
the greatest physical medium of modern times,
end quote, until he died in 1930. Another unlikely friendship that Houdini made was with Joseph Banks Ryan, known as J.B. Ryan. However, it's unclear as to how friendly they were. There's an index in the Ryan Library of correspondence between the two men, as well as a publicity photo of Houdini with an autograph made out to Ryan. A year after Houdini's death, J.B. Ryan would coin the phrase parapsychology as a study of psychology at Duke University. But Ryan showed an interest in what he called abnormal psychology. It's possible that Houdini and Ryan met when Houdini was investigating Marjorie Crandon. Ryan had visited Crandon over 40 times. His interest in the case was purely academic. He had degrees in botany and psychology. His conclusions to Marjorie were mixed. While he admitted to witnessing her fake several portions of her readings, he also stated that there were a handful of phenomena that he could not explain as anything but supernatural. Ryan was best known for experiments he ran using the Zener cards that he helped develop with perceptual psychologist Carl Zener. The cards are used to evaluate a subject's extrasensory perception. You may have seen them. They're flashcards with one of 5 designs on them, like a circle or a plus sign and wavy lines, and the interviewer would shuffle the deck that contained the 5 sets of each card. Then they would draw a card without letting the subject see them. Of course, the subject would try to name the card drawn through clairvoyance.
There's a couple of wavy lines.
Sorry.
This isn't your lucky day.
Ryan reported to have great results with the cards, but his experiments were met with harsh critiques from his colleagues.
What are you trying to prove here anyway?
I'm studying the effect of negative reinforcement on ESP ability.
The effect? I'll tell you what the effect is. It's pissing me off.
Well, then maybe my theory is correct.
You can keep the $5. I've had it.
I will, mister.
However, while these experiments remain controversial, even to this day, they made Ryan famous. He began to receive correspondence from across the country from people looking for help with the paranormal. Some of these stories would compel Ryan to investigate them himself. And many of these letters came from people you may have heard of. People such as Charlie Chaplin, Carl Jung, Jackie Gleason, and even Albert Einstein. But hundreds more, if not thousands, came from the general public simply desperate for help. He even investigated a St. Louis boy whose case inspired the book and the film, The Exorcist. Ryan also received requests from police agencies looking for missing persons and serial killers. He was asked to assist with the Boston Strangler case in the 60s. And he was also asked to conduct several experiments for the CIA and the U.S. military. According to Stacy Horn, author of a book about Ryan's life and research, this controversial and contradictory status is how his career remained throughout his life. He was largely shunned by the scientific community, but highly sought after by the general public, who always held out hope that his experiments would lead to communication with the dead. Horn says, quote,
I'm not a scientist, but I can't dismiss the evidence. It points to the possibility that there seems to be another source of information out there in the world. We don't know how it's transmitted, but experiments show that there are information processes out there that some people pick up on that we just don't understand.
End quote. To learn more about the stories in this episode, check out today.duke.edu, check out fst.org, theguardian.com, history.net, wildabouthoudini.com, and ryanonline.org. And check out the book, Unbelievable, Investigations into Ghosts, Poltergeists, Telepathy, and Other Unseen Phenomena from the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory by Stacy Horn.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
This episode is researched and written by Jeffrey Cochran, and it's produced and hosted by me. You can find everything Jeff's up to at adarkerworld.com, and you can find everything that we're up to at wreakhavocproductions.com. Thank you for listening to this special Halloween episode. I'd like to give a special thanks to our actors, Ariana Tysinger and Ian Russell, for providing their vocal talents in this episode. We hope your All Hallows Eve is safe and spooky. Pick up your copy of our book, Carolina Haint's Ghosts, Folklore, and Mysteries of the Old North State, wherever decent books are sold. You can find the Carolina Haint's podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or you can listen directly from the feed at carolinahaints.libsyn.com. However you listen to the show, be sure to subscribe and do us a favor, leave us a review. Most importantly, share it with your friends, whether it's a post on social media or telling a friend at work who likes spooky stories. We'd love your help in getting the word out about this show. Be sure to like the official Facebook page for Carolina Haints at facebook.com/Carolina Haints. I'm on Instagram at Recover Productions and on Twitter at Hank vs. the Undead. You can find everything related to Carolina Haints at our website, carolinahaints.com. You can reach out to me directly at recoverproductions@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tune in then to hear more about the things that go bump in the night.
It gets you